Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Langley School District number 35 regular meeting of the Board of Education. I'd like to start out with making a special message. Earlier today, Williams Lake First Nations released their preliminary findings from the first phase of their investigation into the St. Joseph's Mission residential school site. The discovery of 93 potential human burial sites, along with the traumatic accounts of survivors and their descendants, reiterates the importance of the work we do as a district to ensure every child matters. We recognize that the release of this information will be triggering and emotional for Aboriginal staff, students, and their families. At this time, it's paramount that we look out for each other and take care of one another, especially our brothers and sisters. So thank you. I'd like to continue on with tonight's meeting, Tuesday, January 25th. And first of all, I just want to note that the audio-visual recording webcasting of our regular board meeting tonight. Those in attendance were informed that as per policy number 7, regular and special meetings of the board may be streamed live, archived, or accessed online. The board reserves as its sole discretion via motion at any meeting the right to not stream live or archive a meeting or a portion of a meeting. Further, the board reserves the right to edit any recorded portion of a meeting. I'd like to call tonight's meeting to order at 7:01 and begin the meeting with our introduction. I'd like to acknowledge that the Langley School District is located on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Maspee, Kwantlen, Tatsi, and Semiahmoo First Nations. I'd like to introduce everyone that's here tonight, starting off with our partner groups, if I could. First of all, we have Tanya Kerr, the LTA president, along with her, Gurdeep Mahil, a teacher from LSS, and Alicia Rempel, DPAC president, and Shelley Sondergaard, QP 1260, executive at large. Also Jennifer Johnson, QP 1260 president. And now our staff that are present. First of all, I'd like to recognize Brittany Reed, Vice Principal from Langley Secondary School, Mike Pugh, District Principal, Aboriginal Education, Maggie Gobriel, District Principal, Wellness and Diversity, Dale Vo, Technical Support Specialist 3, Paul Bobeo, Technical Support Specialist 1, Judy Swanson, Executive Assistant, Joanne Abshire, Communications Manager, Shin Chan, Assistant Secretary Treasurer, Marcello Moino, the Assistant Superintendent, Lisa Lanchberry, Assistant Superintendent, Barry Bunyan, Assistant Superintendent, Woody Bradford, Assistant Superintendent, Brian Isley, the Secretary Treasurer, and Mel Gill is our Superintendent. Also tonight we have trustees that are with us. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge Charlie Fox, Marnie Wilson, Tony Ward, Suzanne Perot, Shelley Coburn, David Todd, and I am the chair, Rod Ross. On to a report from in camera, if I could. The vice chair, would you like to tell us what happened in camera?
Great, thank you. There was an additional special in-camera meeting as well as tonight's in-camera. The items discussed in tonight's in-camera meeting pertain to personnel, legal, and property. The items discussed in the special in-camera meeting of January 11th, 2022 pertained to personnel. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Vice Chair. Moving on to the consent agenda, if we will. The Board of Education adopts the consent agenda as provided. I need a mover and a seconder for that. And I see Shelley Coburn, please. And then I have Mr. David Todd, seconded. And all those in favor? And it passed. And again, if there's any that are opposed to it, if they just put it in the chat. Thank you very much. Consideration of the agenda for tonight. I need a mover and a seconder that the agenda be approved as presented. But first, is there anyone that would like to add anything to tonight's agenda? Yes, Shelley Coburn, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair Ross. Just under other business, can we add discussion on the changes to provincial examinations that were announced the other day? Just an item for information and discussion.
Okay, well, Well, we'll adjust tonight's agenda and we'll add that. Thank you. I
you.
need a mover for the agenda as we've changed it now. So I need a mover, please. And first of all, we'll have that. I'm just trying to look at my screen here. Shelley Coburn and also David Todd. Thank you very much. All those in favor of the agenda for tonight? And is passed unanimously. Thank you. Okay, on to number 6, the superintendent's report, COVID-19 update. Can I pass this off to you, or should we get a mover for it first, Mr. Superintendent?
No, I can take it from here. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Ross, and good evening. I want to start by just introducing myself. My name is Mel Gill, and I'm the proud new superintendent of Langley School District. What I'll argue is the best school district in the province. And I want to thank trustees for the opportunity and the opportunity and the confidence, the trust in me to fulfill this very important role. I wanted also to thank former Superintendent Gord Stewart for his mentorship and guidance through my career in Langley and for preparing me to take on this very difficult challenge. A little bit about my career over the last almost 30 years in education. I started as a teacher in the Mission School District, where incidentally I graduated from, and started out as a social studies English teacher, and then moved into administration after about 8 years. My first position was a vice principal position at Hatzick Secondary. I was a secondary school at the time. And then I was lucky enough after 5 years to be made a principal of an elementary school, Hatzick Elementary. It was at that point that I'd heard a lot about Langley School District through professional learning opportunities. And certainly had some opportunities in working with colleagues that had already moved to the Langley School District. So I put in an application. I was happy to be selected as the vice principal of Langley Secondary and was there for 1.5 years. A fantastic 1.5 years. I'll remember the time that I was there, and I'm looking forward to the presentation from our Langley group later on in this meeting. After my time at Langley Secondary, I was made the principal of Brookswood Secondary, where I spent the next 4 years. An opportunity to work with a great team, a fantastic staff, and an amazing group of students. After my time there, moved to the school board office, where I spent 4 years in HR in various roles: district principal, director, and then assistant superintendent. Was lucky enough to move back to the education side about 5 years ago, working in partnership with who's now deputy superintendent Woody Bradford. The two of us spent many years working together and planning. And working with a fantastic team led by Gord Stewart, who I've mentioned already. I feel like that time working in the Langley District, working in Mission, has prepared me well for this journey. The mentorship that I've received along the way and the support that I continue to get will prepare me well moving forward. Beyond my professional career, my wife and I have been together for almost 30 years. She deserves a medal. We are very proud parents of 3 fantastic young children. My oldest of which is currently moved out of the house and is much older. The other 2 are still with us in the house, and all of them are still attending university. So I've got many years of work ahead of me. I just want to say that through the lens of a parent and as an educator over the last 30 years, that have really come to truly believe that every child matters. Starting with the truths that we've learned in the past years and up until the news today at Williams Lake First Nations, it's become clear that it's our work to continue to listen to the stories of survivors and hear their truths, as painful as they may be. And as leaders, we must continue to educate ourselves and our students while we're walking along the local Aboriginal community on the pathways towards reconciliation. And I pledge to do that work here as a superintendent in Langley School District. What a time we live in. What a time it's been. I reflect on the last 2 years that we've been here working together as a group, And I reflect on just this past summer, the heat domes, the change in weather rather quickly with the new thing that we've all learned to hear about, the atmospheric rivers, the flooding, the neighbors just to the east of us in Abbotsford, the ice after that, the snowstorms that followed, and of course, all in the background of the pandemic over the last number of months. And with Omicron, that's actually asked the whole system to recalibrate itself. And with that, the ministry, over the last few days of the break, we met with the ministry and they talked about the guiding principles. And we reflected as well as a district and recalibrated ourselves as to those four main principles that we're working with. The first guiding principle for us is, of course, the health and safety of our staff and students. And then in that first week, we continue to do the work that we need to do around supporting our essential service workers. And then as well, working with our children with exceptional needs. And then last but not least, the content planning with the continuity of learning in mind. Not last because it didn't matter, last because those other things mattered more. So with the health and safety, the expansion of the guidelines that were put in place for us were space arrangements. Need to make sure that we did the best work that we could to ensure the safety of our students. Now that didn't mean less kids in school. What it meant was we needed to do things just a little bit differently. Where it was necessary, we had opportunities where students were entering buildings differently, leaving buildings differently, having recesses and lunches differently. It meant that maybe students were in zones of play at the elementary school level. At the high school level, it meant that we were back to the place where directional arrows were in the schools. We even had to, in some of our schools, really reimagine how we were doing things as far as the transitions between schools, especially when it came to some of our bigger schools, where a 5-minute or a 6-minute transition changed to a 10 to a 15-minute transition. All sacrifices for what was best for students. As far as staff spacing was concerned, we needed to ensure that we weren't having face-to-face meetings with our staff. So we're doing our very best to ensure that we're having meetings via Teams, online, in whatever fashion we can, where that can be done. School gatherings and events, we're limiting those the best as possible. Where we don't need to do assemblies, we're not using Teams platforms for that as well. Visitor access, and this has really been a difficult piece for parents. I know, especially in our elementary schools, parents love to be in the building. I get that. But at this point, we're weighing, the positives versus the negatives, and we want to make sure that, again, getting back to those principles that the safety of our students is paramount, and we ensure that we're keeping visitors out unless it's impacting the learning of students. For sports, certainly the ministry's been working with BC School Sports and with our schools and ensuring that games of play can still happen when we're playing interleague. However, tournament play is now something that has been canceled between schools. The other thing we need to think about as we move towards playoff season for basketball, what does that look like and are we doing things differently? Over the past little while, we've been busy. We've been doing a lot of work around getting our attendance data. It's never been so important, especially in looking at where we are. We've done some comparisons. So the week before Christmas, we looked at what our attendance rates were, and we were about 11% across the district for all of our students. And coming back that week of January 17th, we were actually up to about 18%, obviously a jump. Omicron was having an impact on our students. And as well, many of our parents were making decisions to keep their kids at home as well. So it was really hard to tell the difference between the two and other sicknesses or illnesses that may have been occurring. Based on the data, obviously we had about a 6% difference. Summary of attendance data, some schools are seeing higher rates, but at the same time we are seeing some schools actually having lower rates. And the district is monitoring that information on a daily basis, and we're sending that information to Fraser Health. Fraser Health on the backside is communicating with our schools, and we are connecting to ensure that that whatever's happening in that school based on the attendance isn't something that requires an alert to the community. And we continue to monitor that as best we can. We want to continue to ensure that our families are doing all they can at home, doing their tests, their health and safety checks in the mornings with their kids, not sending their students to school when they're sick, and making sure that you do the best to let us know as a school in as accurate way as possible about why your child is at home. We understand that you don't have to tell us that your child has COVID, but it is helpful. And it is helpful because then we can pass some of that information on to Fraser Health should that be necessary. As I've mentioned already, the notification process is a little bit different because you're not getting letters home every single day. And what that looks like is that we've got indicators that are being looked at, daily attendance being one. And Fraser Health connects with our schools, as I've mentioned, and we continue to have those conversations daily. You're going to meet District Principal Maggie Gobriel, who is on meetings regularly with Fraser Health, communicating with them around our attendance and any individual concerns that we may have. With continuity of learning, one of the things that we've been planning for, especially in that first week of school back, where we were working with about 700 ESW students, our staff was also working at preparing our schools or students and their classrooms to move online should that be a necessary thing. So there might be 3 reasons for a functional or for closures. The first being a health closure. We don't have any control over that. That would be Fraser Health. The second would be a functional closure. And a functional closure is something that I'll explain in just a few minutes. But basically what it means is that we don't have enough staff present within the district to support the learning and safety of your children. And the third item that could disrupt learning for some students, not necessarily all, and it was sometimes it was getting to be a bit of a concern, was our transportation concerns and making sure that we had enough drivers to make sure that we could get kids to school. During that time where we were planning, our staff were ensuring that all of our students were set up on teams, should that be necessary. Our instructional services department did an outstanding job of putting together in-services and Pro-D for our teachers and our staff. Our IT department was busily working to ensure that we had devices ready just in case we had to go online and there were students that didn't have those devices available. Our learning support services department was putting together plans to support our diverse learners. Lots of different things around that, perhaps even looking at in a functional closure, buildings aren't closed, so maybe even having our kids actually still come to school where that was necessary. So what does a functional closure process look like for us at the school district level? We are in the evenings, district staff, our leadership staff, are checking district-wide as far as the staffing updates. So about 8:30 every single night, we get we're connecting with one another and checking to see how many TOCs we have, if we're short, where there could be some problems. And then at 5:30 in the morning, we're checking in again to make sure that we have the appropriate staffing. At the same time, or just a little bit while later, we're checking to make sure we have transportation available. We have the bus drivers available to ensure that we can get students to school. And then again, we're looking at about 7:30, going over every single school to make sure we have all of our classrooms covered. We also have backup plans in place with our district staff, our district teachers and district administrators in case we have to funnel staff to a particular school because we don't have enough staff. The one thing we don't want to do is to create chaos in your homes, in the homes of families. What we'd like to be able to do is, if we do get to a place where potentially we get to a functional closure, that we would do that at the end of a day, not at the beginning of a day. I understand how that could be difficult on families. I certainly have a number of thank yous. My first thank you is to the students. They've made an inordinate amount of changes in the way they do things. A number of things they've missed over the last 22 months. I know that from my own child. It's been difficult, not just in the learning environment, but beyond that, socially, in sports and theater, band and other activities. It's been a difficult time, and all of you have come through doing the very best you can. And I've leaned on one another and the adults in your life for additional support where needed. And just for all students to know that the school district is there to do what's necessary to support as well. The parents and guardians for your support, for your trust of our staff in our schools at this time. At this time of uncertainty and challenge, you provided us the opportunity to work with your children and to learn with your kids, so thank you for that. Our support staff, working side by side with students in our schools, again, making a difference in their lives. Our teachers who've gone above and beyond in planning and support, not just for the students that are working with them, but for many of the students who are away for longer periods of time. To our administrators who don't know the meaning of the word no, who continue to do everything they need to do to ensure that our schools are open and safe for kids and for their staffs. To the district team that I work with up here at the school board office, who's always on the ready to do whatever's necessary to ensure that our schools will be open. And as you can tell by the times that we're talking, especially our HR department, thank you to them for all that work that they're doing to ensure that we're well versed as far as the decisions that we're making around whether schools are open and closed. Thank you, Chair Ross. That is my report, my COVID report this evening.
There you go, and thank you very much, Superintendent. I need a mover for the superintendent's report and a seconder if I could. Charlie Fox and Suzanne Perot, seconded by. Thank you very much. Okay, the Board of Education received the update on COVID-19 information as presented. All those in favor, please. And I can see everyone today. This is absolutely wonderful. Okay, and it passes unanimously. Thank you. On to 6.2, we have antiracism in the school district, and our presenter is going to be a number of our staff, and I think it's going to be led by Magdi Gobril. So let's, if we could just turn that over to Magdi at this point, and then we will see where it goes. So Magdi, go ahead.
Thank you, sir, and thank you, Mr. Gill, and thank you also to Mike Pugh and Brittany Reed and Gurpreet, who are going to join us in a moment here to help us out on this discussion on anti-racism. So, especially today, by the way, when we're realizing that you know, another 93 graves uncovered today. We have to understand that the roots of racism in Canada are firmly planted in the way in which Indigenous people have been treated throughout colonial history. And yet a roadmap out of our racist past has been set for us by Aboriginal community through Truth and Reconciliation. And this will also help us to make better the lives of those who are Black and people of color. So we've been discussing this a lot at superintendent's meetings throughout the last year or so, wanting to make sure that we learn together, that we share stories, that we discuss ways in which we can work with our schools to ensure that they become anti-racist. I should change the slide for you while I'm doing this. There we go. One of the anchor texts that we're using for that is So You Want to Talk About Race by Ejimo Oluo. It's been a fabulous text to work with. Further than that, we're wanting to make sure that our policies and procedures reflect our beliefs. And so we've updated our Admin Procedure 170, which is around harassment, to include language around anti-racism. Our schools are updating their library resources. We have this new Sora app. It's an online resource where staff and students can download information 24/7, all of which has been uploaded with fabulous resources around anti-racism, ensuring that the diversity in our district is represented, and also that we're learning about our history and the current situation around anti-racism, so that we can improve our learning and make the world a better place for everybody, especially our community right here. There's a great diversity resource that we put together. It's online for all staff to use. When they're doing their classes, they've got posters and videos and lesson plans that teachers can draw from. It's got stuff around anti-racism, but also around diversity, diverse abilities, LGBTQ. We used this resource just the other day. A bunch of teachers and administrators got together in planning for Black History Month and Diversity and Respect Week. a fabulous resource for people to use, and that's been developed over the last year. It actually started a little bit before that, but we've been adding to it. Ensuring that all staff and students feel represented in schools is really important to us. And so we're highlighting different holidays and celebrations that people have, so that one, we can all learn about it, and two, people can see themselves reflected. We've had a huge positive response from this, whether we're putting posters up or talking about or announcements around Diwali or Ramadan, Hanukkah. Lunar New Year's coming up real soon as well. Schools have been putting together some awesome initiatives, and I'm going to get you to forward that slide for me if you can. They've surveyed students. They've created anti-racism leads and working groups in their schools. They're doing book studies. They're inviting speakers and teacher experts in, putting displays up, cultural activities. And we're going to hear a little bit more from Langley Secondary in a moment to share what they're going to be doing for the upcoming Black History Month. One of the things that we want to do is ensure that we are seeking guidance and ensuring transparency in the work that we're doing. To better understand the systemic barriers that exist right within our own district and the experience of people with diverse backgrounds while we are on this journey to try and become truly anti-racist. So we're wanting to engage a consultant to help us to do that. And we're in the process of working with that to again, make sure we do the work right. Finally, for myself, this wonderful man called Kevin Lamarre that we met this year, who's already done one presentation for us around reconciliation, our journey till now. Tomorrow, he's doing another presentation around deconstructing otherness. Decolonization is coming up, and Indigenous pedagogy is coming up. He's helping us understand the link between truth and reconciliation and anti-racism through the lens of trauma-informed practice. He'll also be doing a keynote in February. And we're looking forward to Mr. Mike Pugh, who's going to tell us a little bit more about him. But before that, I'm going to just play a quick 1-minute clip of his last presentation, and then I'll pass it over to Mr. Mike Pugh.
This is our calculation against that. If we're doing reconciliation the right way, this ensures safety for Canadians, not just Indigenous, but non-Indigenous as well. For people of color, for people from the LGBTQIA community, if we're doing reconciliation the right way, there are no losers. Everybody wins. A school that is rich in reconciliation is one where every child is able to walk into that building and do this. Check this out. This is what we want for all kids. To be able to walk into our buildings and go, and know that they're safe. Like Yuri Brofenberner has said, to know that there are adults in that building that are unconditionally crazy about them. To be able to look into a mirror and love who they see and what they see, right? And where they come from. That's the goal of this. There are no losers. And so this is truly, truly our work for the benefit of all Canadians.
Thank you, Magdi, and good evening to all of you. And before I highlight what Kevin had to say there, I think it's appropriate that I take a moment. We're going to really talk about anti-racism and truth and reconciliation, that we need to honor the words from Chief Sellers today out of the Williams Lake First Nation. My thoughts go out to him and his team, who talk about that this journey and the stories of the survivors and the work they've done has taken them into the deep, darkest recesses of human behavior. And he shared at the end that we cannot afford to have another generation of students and of the community who go through this trauma without a real understanding of the truth. And so to go back to Kevin's point, if we're doing reconciliation the right way, there are no losers, everyone wins. And with that in mind, you cannot, in the context of Canadian history, have an anti-racism policy or an anti-racism education system that is not intertwined with reconciliation. Reconciliation needs to be part of the work we do of anti-racism within this district. And the Truth and Reconciliation Commission defines reconciliation as about establishing, maintaining a mutually respectful relationship between Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal peoples in this country. And there are things that need to happen. In order for that to happen, there has to be an awareness of the past, an acknowledgement of the harm that has been inflicted, atonement for the causes, and action to change behavior. In other words, there must be education. And if we do not have education, we cannot move forward on reconciliation. And I always go back to the grounding words of Senator Murray Sinclair, who shares, education is what got us here, and education is what will get us out. So to the Board of Education, I've shared a lot of this information with you previously, but I wanted to highlight it again under the context not of Indigenous education, but under the work of anti-racism that we do in this district. As a starting place for so many staff, we talk about the 9th teaching standard. That need for educators to critically examine their own biases, attitudes, beliefs, values, and practices to facilitate change. That really dig into what we know, what we hold to be true, what we've been taught over the years about First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in this country we call Canada. And do work as staff to figure out how these biases, attitudes, beliefs, values, and practices can help us to facilitate change in what we do. Highlighting some of the things we've done in the year, starting with Odyssey last year in February, we had Sheila McLean come and she shared her presentation, what is anti-racism and what it's doing, what's it doing, you have to say, in a nice field like education. And she's written a number of articles and shared different things. She's worked with Idle No More and been part of that movement. And what she asked us to examine is really the white settler colonialism and our understanding of that myth of meritocracy, that myth of if we work hard, we will get what we've earned. And that those who don't work hard are lazy and haven't earned it. We looked at the ways in which our teaching practices can address inequitable outcomes for Indigenous students. And so she started us off with some incredible learnings that day and teachings that carried on throughout the year within classes, within the work being done by teachers. And then May 21st came, the end of May, when the chief of Tecumloops, the Secwepemc First Nation stood up and started sharing about the 215. And we know now of the 7,500 that are accounted for. And we know today that Chief Sellers shared so many of them will go unaccounted for. So if we do not continue this work, we have failed as educators and as human beings. And so we cannot stop talking about these children who never had a chance, who never got to come home, who never got to give back to their community. And so how do we do that piece with education? It was said today, the power and the stories of the survivors. All of these share stories of survivors. All of these tell stories of descendants of survivors, of their shared experience and trauma. It is upon us, it is a duty for us to educate ourselves and to dig into these hard stories to hear so that we learn more. It is not upon us to go ask Indigenous peoples to share, but it is upon us to go and do that learning. And so we are able to do that through the Sora app. We built incredible connections to language. Those are pictures here of the language working together. Natsamat, Latsamat, one heart, one mind. And I thank the teachings of Sesmalot, and Deanna Miller and Carlin Andres and others in the community who continue to share, and the power of that language and the power of the work from the Learn Hunkaminam website. In fact, I had the honor of seeing a video that was tweeted out the other day of a student from Blacklock Fine Arts who was so excited to share with his parents the language he had learned at home and the language of the land. All of these are acts of anti-racism to teach this language. And then we had the duty, and we did incredible work to honor September 30th, in this case in the district, the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. We honored on the 29th. And these rocks come from Dorothy Peacock Elementary at their outdoor education area, where every student painted an orange rock and placed it around the outside. And the powerful, powerful message that we can't reiterate enough of you belong here. And so finally, we jump into the work that is coming to us on February 11th and the further teachings of the truth, because there is never enough learning of the truth to be done. And so with Odyssey, we look to listen, reflect, and act with 3 incredible keynotes. From Myrna McCallum, who's the trauma-informed lawyer, from, as Maggie shared, Kevin Lamarre will share with us as well, and Dr. Joanne Archibald, who will share about Indigenous Storyworks. All of them will share work around truth and reconciliation, around anti-racism, trauma-informed practice, and really delving into the truth of what we know. And I always go back to this. We talked about the importance of education, and it's Robin Wall Kimmerer, if you haven't read her book, Braiding Sweetgrass. It's a brilliant piece of work, where she says, isn't this really the purpose of education, to learn the nature of your own gifts and how to use them for good in the world? Because Lord knows we've done enough in the education system that hasn't been good. And we have a way to make change and move forward. And to highlight some of those changes, I'm now going to hand it over to Brittany Reed and to Gurpreet Mahil from LSS, who are coming to share about the work they've done at Langley Secondary.
Hello, so we're here from LSS. So we're going to share with you a little bit of the work that we've been doing at the school. And this quote really resonated with us as a group, just looking at that we can't dismantle what we cannot see, and you cannot challenge what you do not understand. And so this is the idea that we have an anti-racism group at the school among the staff, and we started with it last year around this time. And it was really looking at how do we unpack some of these difficult things, and the necessity of unpacking it before we can actually teach it and then bring it into our classrooms. And so we knew that understanding and knowing the why is always more effective in inspiring cooperation, trust, and change. So once you understand the why, the how, and the what naturally follow. Yeah, and we knew that this was necessary in order for us to examine and dismantle our systems, structures, and our instructional practices. So we needed to engage in learning and unlearning before we could authentically communicate our why. So last year, our committee focused and embarked on a journey to delve into our own identity, and then power systems, privilege, and implicit bias. And this is in order to understand and name inequities in ourselves, systems, and school. And the key for this, and we had really successful discussions, but it was among our committee, we centered on our commitment to creating and maintaining a brave space. So that was crucial in our group. We had many different people with many different perspectives, and we had to establish that brave space before we could move anywhere and start to create change. So this was a space where the community of learners could learn and grow by sharing, disagreeing, and working together, by listening, staying present, and challenging ideas. And we really created a comfortable space for people to work through our discomfort. And then at the beginning of this year, we started a literacy circle, and we knew that some people were at different access points in their learning journey. And so we created a list of about 13 books and then also allowed people to sort of pick books to read, just so they could focus on the areas that they wanted to learn more about. And we had sort of a big umbrella essential question of how does identity shape experiences and how does experiences shape identity? And from all this work, in November, we got to our why, which could also continue to shift and change, but we created a mission statement collaboratively. So to intentionally dismantle systems and patterns of racism and discrimination in our school community. We stand in solidarity and are committed to recognizing and appreciating our diverse collection of identities, perspectives, and experiences by actively holding space and centering the voices and experience of those who have historically been marginalized. By listening, learning, and engaging in self-reflection, we strive to create an equitable school community where all members feel a sense of belonging and empowerment. And I think the learning that we did was crucial in getting a mission statement such as this. The discussion we had the day we were doing it, and just the learning that had been done from last year until this point, it was quite amazing to see the growth. And now I'm going to pass it over to Gurpreet, and he is going to discuss our how and our what.
Hello everyone, Gurpreet Mahil here. This year I've taken on a new role at our school. I'm the department head for diversity at the school, so my responsibility is to make sure that students feel a sense of belonging at the school, and we have activities and events that offer an opportunity for them to learn and to experience different cultures. So what are we currently doing, or how? Staff development. The key to this is having staff on board. Staff need to realize that there is a problem, and the only way we're going to fix this problem is if everyone works together. The problem right now is the underlying causes of racism, and it still exists. We're seeing it in professional hockey right now. It's everywhere. So what we feel we need to do is to educate and train our staff. We need to explain to them what unconscious bias is and have them work through it. We also allocate time in our staff meetings, and that's something we've been doing with Marcello. So every second staff meeting, we allocate time for diversity. And we have presentations, we have discussions. We also provide professional development opportunities for staff and encourage them to attend some of these. So sharing those with staff on a regular basis is something that I help do at the school, and we hope staff will participate in these professional developments. But the biggest key we know are the students, and how do we get the students involved? Because you can't have progress unless students are involved. So we use our school-wide rep time to carry out lessons on anti-racism topics. We are in the midst of creating an anti-racism and diversity club. So our first meeting is actually February 7th. I have 5 or 6 students that are already excited to be part of this committee. We hope to have a few teachers and students working together to create opportunities in our school to promote diversity. We are also undertaking an anti-racism student survey. Why are we doing this? Well, the reason we're doing this is to get a better understanding of who our students are, their background. I had a discussion with Marcello. I remember this discussion that how many of these students were actually born in Canada? And to me, I think our population at LSS would be close to 30 or 40% of the population is not born in Canada. So I'd like to know that. Like when we consider doing activities and events at our schools, we need to know what background these students come from and what kind of things that they need at school and how we can bring them in. So that's something we're undertaking. We're going to do that anti-racism survey in March, and we hope to get a better understanding of our student population. Our how. Celebrating and learning. We do announcements. We try to do an announcement every time something comes up, whether that's Lunar New Year whether that's Black Excellence Day. We try to make announcements. Actually, we've had really good response from teachers and students on the announcements that we've been doing. So we're going to continue with doing announcements regularly. We're going to use our monitors in the hallways to have visuals. Visuals that we share in our social media, but also so students walking down the halls can know what's going on at their school. We're going to continue to use our rep time to carry out anti-racism lessons with the students. We're going to bring in guest speakers, and we're going to have cultural celebrations. If you look at the picture on the right, this was from Diwali that took place in November. If you look at that picture, you can see the interest amongst the students, what's going on here. These celebrations are entry points. They get discussions started. It's actually very interesting. After Diwali, I had several South Asian students talk to me about non-South Asians wearing turbans is considered racist. So we had to have discussions to talk about why I believed that this isn't racism. This is them accepting and embracing our culture. So it creates opportunities for discussions to take place in schools and in classrooms. So here's the schedule of our upcoming learning at LSS. February, as you're aware, is Black History Month. Along with Brittany, my co-chair, we're planning rep lessons for the whole month. In addition, and we are going to carry, our first lesson is going to be talking about implicit biases. We actually did this with our staff, a similar lesson, and we want to carry this lesson on with the students. We feel that this is a good way to do it because the staff has actually participated in that lesson, so they have some comfort level, and we feel that they can contribute to the discussion that takes place in the classroom. March, we will be doing our anti-racism student survey. In February, I didn't add on here, is though we are creating our Anti-Racism and Diversity Club. We hope that that club can help us with additional things to do over Black History Month, and to also we want to vet our questions for our anti-racism student survey through the students themselves before we put it out. April is Ramadan. We have a significant population at LSS that are Muslims, and they fast for the month of Ramadan. And at the end of every day, there's a meal, an iftar meal. And this meal is to have with family and friends to break the fast and then to be ready to start again the next day. We are hoping, depending on COVID restrictions, is that we would like to invite our Muslim population to our school for an iftar meal, hosted by the staff at the school. I think this is a very powerful thing that can take place because a lot of our Muslim families only come to the school when their kid is in trouble. And we have to get out of that habit. We have to bring them into the school. We have to have the parents involved. So I think this could be a really strong connector to bring families into the school to see that they are welcome and they belong in the school. And I think that wraps up my slides. And I will pass it up over to Mr. Gill.
Just a quick update for trustees. We will be sharing the links to the professional development opportunities. So Kevin Lamarre on the 26th, and as well during the Pro D days as well. So if you're interested in that, we can send that out. I'll have staff do that for you so that you can participate as well. The one, and we could talk a little bit about the logistics certainly a little bit later. I do want to take a minute just to thank the presenters. I think first, timely as far as what's happening in the world today, what's happening in our province, what's been happening in our province. Certainly all of the, from the chair to the rest of the speakers this evening have acknowledged what's happening in Williams Lake. And we continue as a school district, as leaders, as people, to really trying to understand and work together in our next steps around truth and reconciliation and anti-racism. I commend the staff at Langley Secondary. The work, as we found out through the district at the superintendent's meeting, is emotional. It's difficult. It takes courage. It takes humility, and it takes leadership. And so, thanks to Gurpreet and to Brittany for your work, and of course to Magdi and to Michael Pugh, who certainly have been instrumental in helping us walk through this. Not easy, like I said, very emotional, and at this time it is something to be commended. So, Chair Ross, thank you so much. That is the report on anti-racism, and we're happy to take questions as well.
Okay, and thank you very much for that report. I need a mover and a seconder that the Board of Education receives the update on anti-racism. And can I have a mover? Okay, Tony Ward and Suzanne Perot. Thank you very much. Any questions, please? I see, first of all, Shelley Coburn, and then I've got a number of other people on my speakers list. So Shelley Coburn, trustee, would you like to speak at this time?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chair Ross, and thank you, Superintendent Gill, for answering my question kind of upfront. I was interested about that learning and who it was available to and how it would be accessible for some of our school communities. So I think that's really important. And it doesn't really happen often, but I'm really struggling with my words. Their presentation was timely, and before I say more, I just want to acknowledge the truth. And one of the most eloquent speakers I've ever heard was Chief Sellers today. And he said something so profound. He said there can be no reconciliation without truth. So the truth is that the Canadian nation state engaged in a mass attempt of cultural genocide. And we are finding this in these unmarked graves. And that is the sad truth of this nation's history. So I do think that this presentation is quite timely, and I appreciate the staff, and I appreciate Mr. Pugh for his vulnerability and showing the impact that this has on people, and to be so vulnerable so publicly is something that I think is commendable and necessary. And I wanted to say that before I got to my actual point, which is I am so happy to see and to hear that there is a bridging of our work with Truth and Reconciliation in our Aboriginal department and anti-racism, because up until tonight, they almost were treated as two separate entities, yet they can't be separated because of the systemic racism, as Mr. Pugh said, and in the Indiana Act, which is legislation, that is systemic racism. That's racism in policy. And so until we can deconstruct the racism that's in our laws, we can't really talk about undoing racism in this country. So just so impressed with the courage and the bravery of the people in this district to do this work, because what it does is it tells our school community, our parents and our teachers and our children and our staff that we recognize that there is racism in this country and in our schools, and it's in our policies, it's in our language, it's in our procedures, it's the way we ask students to fill out forms. It's all of the things that we take for granted as normal, but they are white colonial privilege. And to see that up on a screen in a public board meeting really shows me that Langley School District really sets the bar in terms of inclusion and anti-racism. And I just want to say how impressed and proud I am of the district that I serve. So that's all. And thank you. Thank you for your work.
Thank you, Trustee Coburn. And now on to Suzanne Perot. Trustee Perot, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Very powerful and important conversation we're having today, and I thank you, Superintendent Gill, for ensuring that we're hearing this today. It's really difficult. So many words, so many thoughts, so many feelings. The mission statement that came out in the presentation to intentionally dismantle systems and patterns of racism and discrimination in our schools and community, the first line. If we sat there, we're doing the work, and that is heartening. And as we walk into the conversations today regarding more babies being revealed, my heart for our department that Mike is leading is that we're carrying them, that they're not carrying us right now. It's really important from a trauma-informed practice, from a truth and reconciliation practice, that we're lifting them up and protecting them and surrounding them, because their heart work, their work that they have to walk through in the heavy lifting of the conversations, the reflections back of what each individual family member has endured and is enduring still, is profound, it's triggering. And we need to make sure we're protecting them in that conversation. So I highlight that because that's important to me, because our staff is important, not that it's not important to anybody else. I absolutely know, Superintendent, you value our team tremendously, and you're a fierce protector of our people, and I thank you for that. The anti-racism survey, that's exciting to hear, that's coming out. I just wanted to comment on that because it tells me we're moving closer towards those steps of equity scans that we need to do in the district, so that we understand who we're in community with, and how do we best support our students and our staff to support one another in those conversations. The power privilege wheel, love it. It's super profound, super important. Those power wheels are really critical when we're doing our trauma-informed work, and I love that it's being acknowledged and utilized as part of the conversation. When we're looking at what Trustee Colburn talked about regarding statements today with respect to reconciliation, no reconciliation without truth. And we need to lift that up with compassion and empathy. I like what Frederick Douglass says: it's easier to build strong children than to repair, he says, broken men. I'm going to say broken people. And this deconstructing that we must go through and do the deep work of unconscious bias within ourselves, and then help support each other walk through that, is really critical. I don't have any real questions outside the fact that I hope that we're ensuring we're supporting Mike's department and Mike as we walk through the rest of this week, for sure, of grieving and loss and remembering. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Perot, and everybody's words are really so powerful today. So, and Trustee Coburn's as well. If I could hear Marnie Wilson, Trustee Wilson, go ahead. You're next.
Great, thank you so much. I echo the words of my fellow colleagues who have just spoken on this. It is such a deep and powerful subject, but something that we must talk about. And yeah, I more wanted to just thank you guys for your presentations. Everybody, your work is so powerful. It is helping so many students, and it's so long overdue that districts come to these anti-racism groups, and the link between reconciliation, it all just really makes sense. And I also want to say that I'm so encouraged to see the people who are on their committees or are their district heads at their schools, LSS. I know that I have such confidence knowing that you're in those positions. So that is amazing. I was also really happy to hear about the survey. It's just such a wonderful idea, and you know, you need to know who you're serving so that you can not only be culturally sensitive but also to celebrate their different cultures. So I was really happy to hear about that. And I just want to ask that you make sure you come back and report in after you get through all of those things you're doing on the calendar, because we want to hear back about how they go. And so just keep doing the good work, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Vice Chair Marty Wilson. And next I have David Todd. Go ahead, Trustee Todd.
Thank you. As a person with tremendous white privilege, I sit here and I guess the analogy I have is racehorses and the blinders they have on, and they begin the race and all they can think about is finishing first. And that statement about challenging what we cannot see, I have those blinders on every day. I was born into a society with systemic racism, and I received an advantage all the way through as a result. This is hard work, but this is the work of a public education system. We talk about it all the time. How do we build equity? Not equity in finances, but equity in each loving child, that we are given the hope that they will succeed. I really want to express my gratitude to the people doing this work, because it's work nonetheless. It's easy to avoid this, but it's work. I want to thank you for it. I want to thank you for holding space, for your patience. I like how they did the construct around the why. They said your reflections, your respectfulness, because not every staff, I've been a member of staff, not every staff member is going to be on board. Your courage, tremendous courage to take this on. With the backdrop of a pandemic behind us, remaining curious throughout this process, and as Mike Pugh exhibited, your fragility and your vulnerability in this moment. I can't say how much more utterly impressed I am by this district to be having this conversation at this time, at this moment. I did want to not provide a cautionary tale, but there will be pushback and there will be conversations, and we know there's going to be uncomfortable times ahead. But I want to give license to this conversation. You can count on my unfettered support for it. That's my pledge. So please pass on my gratitude to everybody involved in this endeavor. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee David Todd. And comment I would just like to say is that I have tremendous hope because we're talking about it. And if you could talk about things, you can fix things, but things you can't talk about will never get fixed. They'll never get improved. So the fact that we're talking about it is great hope. The second thing I wanted to say is we talked about truth there earlier, and I just want to say that truth is our best friend. It may not be pretty, and it certainly isn't pretty what we just found out today about the 93 the young people that are no longer with us. So, but the truth is our best friend, and we must embrace it. And so those are the only comments I want to say. I just want to say thank you, Maggie Gobriel, Mike Pugh, Brittany Reed, and Gurpreet Mihill. Thank you so much for your presentation. We bless you. Thank you. Okay, I've got a mover and seconder. So if I could just ask for a call for the vote. The Board of Education receives the update on the antiracism in the Langley School District. All those in favor, please. And it is unanimous. Thank you very much. On to 6.3, we have the amended district calendars for 2022-2023 and 2023-2024. And I'd like to ask Assistant Superintendent Barry Bunyan if you'd like to present at this point. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Chair Ross. Good evening, trustees. I would like to share with trustees a procedural amendment that we will look at for our district calendars. This should be familiar to trustees. We went through a very similar process, almost identical process actually, in September when we amended the current year's district calendar, the 2021-22. This process is to amend the next 2 years district calendars, 2022-23, 2023-24. These calendars, I'll remind trustees, have actually already been approved. You approved them in April of last year, and they are for amendment, and I'll explain why. Okay, so again, you have previously approved these calendars, but since we approved them back in April, the federal government designated September 30th for the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation for federal employees and federally regulated workplaces. So of course that day was not included in our district calendar, and actually there has been some, and probably because it's happened fairly quickly, there has been some confusion around whether it's a day that people work or kids are in session, not in session. So the government this year asked us in September, which was the process we went through, to include this day, and that day this year actually was a day not in session. It has not yet been determined whether or not this day will be a day in session or not coming up in the next couple of years. The province continues to work with Indigenous leaders, organizations, and communities to best decide how to remember and honor the children who were taken from their families. This day, though, however, we've been asked, well, all districts have been asked, to be reflected on our calendar, and then the government, the ministry, will advise us on the purpose and the activities and the things that will happen on that day as we get closer to it. Today's process is not the detailed calendar process that the board will engage in with us in April. This is simply taking our district calendars and including the day for the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. So I know this is far too small for people to read, completely understand, but as trustees know, this colored calendar is our district calendar. This one happens to be for 22-23. We also have one for 23-24, but I didn't see a need to put them both up there. What you see in front of you, everything on there except for the orange square is what is already there, because that's already been approved. If you look at September, and there is an inset there on the right for you, September 30th is orange. That is the only day in the school calendar that's listed as orange. It recognizes that particular day. And again, we will get guidance from the ministry later, whether that's a day in session or a day not in session. So the purpose of this presentation today is to put to trustees a motion that you approve the updated district calendars for 22, 23, 23, 24 as presented. It's a motion in front of you, and that's simply to add the September 30th day to those 2 years. With that, I'll turn it over to Chair Ross.
And thank you, Assistant Superintendent Barry Bunyan. I do need a mover and a seconder for the motion that is posted right in front of us, that the Board of Education approve the updated district calendars for 2022-23 and 2023-2024. Anyway, a mover, please, if I could. And You know, I can't see anyone say, okay, there it is. I see Charlie Fox and I see David Todd. Thank you very much. Seconded. All right, any questions regarding the calendar, the amended calendar? You've already passed the calendar, so it's the amended calendar. So it's just that one day we're talking about here. Any comments, questions about that? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion? And I don't see anyone else in opposed in the chat, so I'm going to say that it's passed unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, on to 7.1, the Secretary Treasurer's Report, Capital Projects Update. Can I take this over to, I guess it's the Secretary Treasurer, Mr. Zelli. Would you like to share with us the Capital Projects Update?
Thank you, Chair Ross. Wanted to go through a bit of an update on some of our capital projects that we have been undertaking in the district. Earlier this evening in camera, I've already given some details to the board, but wanted to provide some information for the public on some of the statuses and some pictures so people can see some of the work that's been done. Basically for the district, once we have approval from the ministry to build a school or to take on a major project, we are given a capital project funding agreement, and that agreement outlines the funding that is allowed for the district to spend on that project. We have 3 that are ongoing. Southwest Yorkson is now known as Donna Gabriel Elementary, but it was approved as Southwest Yorkson. Short Reed Seismic and Vanguard Seismic were the big projects. The process with the ministry changed over the last couple years, in that the approved funding envelope at the initial approval is only items that can be quantified and verified at the time of the signing. So you can see that there was an approved project, for example, for Southwest Yorkson of $18.8 million versus a total project potential of $32.2 million, with the difference being in reserves in this project, $13.3 million of items that the district, once we get farther in the project, could justify the need for those funds, and then the ministry would formally approve and release those things. And you'll see that that has happened for a couple of projects as I speak specifically about them. As mentioned, Donna Gabriel Robbins Elementary, which was started as Southwest Yorkson Elementary, did need to have some of those reserve funds moved up when we went through the tendering process. So the ministry approved $8.8 million, moving the approved funding envelope to $27.6 million, which was enough to complete that project. The school was completed and opened in September, although we didn't get substantial completion on that project till December 2nd due to some of the delays that we had with COVID and some of the materials arriving on time for that. But we were able to open the school on time with some of the things that just needed to be done in the evenings and weekends to get that done. The contractor is currently working with us to finish the deficiency list, which is completely normal for a project at this point in stage. And about 80% when I wrote this report last week was almost completed, and that number is probably even higher today. Unfortunately, with COVID, we haven't been able to do our usual grand opening of the school, where we would invite the people and the public and trustees to view the school and see the school. We hope to still do that once COVID allows, but thought we would give some pictures of the inside of the building and the outside so you can have a better idea of what it looks like until we can get people to go through it on their own. The picture on the right is the north-facing side of the school, and the picture on the left is the south-facing side of the building. And you can also see the playground in there on the one on the right, just a little bit that went in just before Christmas, which was one of the things that we had lead time issues on getting delivered in time for the opening. On the inside, the picture on the left basically is as you come through the front doors, and the picture on the right shows the upstairs concourse for the second floor. There's a bit of a look down into the bottom floor, and then places along the side for some collaboration and breakout areas for staff and students. These pictures, I guess, would show some of the rooms. The far left one is a classroom. The middle one is the learning commons, and the far right is the multi-purpose room that is at the school. So hopefully that gives you just a brief glimpse of what the new school looks like. And then, like I said, hopefully we will be able to show off the school properly once we are able to do so. Short read is a seismic project that the ministry has approved and we've undertaken. It also has gone to tender stage, and at this point we'd request the ministry of just under 2.6 more funds to be moved from the reserve to the budget, which was approved, making the approved budget just under $7.9 million. This project is basically, the big thing is reattaching the structures of the roof to the wall structures to make sure that it is a seismic rating. There will be a couple pictures after this just kind of showing what that looks like right now. And they're working in 2 phases with the gym, the main office, and then the classrooms as well. In the next couple weeks, they'll start taking off sections of the roof and start doing that upgrades to that. The project currently is a little bit behind. Some of that is the delays that we received with this new process and getting all the approvals. There are some areas where the project manager does feel that we'll be able to make up some time as we go through, so the hope is that we still will be able to complete on time. As mentioned, these are a couple pictures, so basically it kind of shows you the scaffolding and the covering that goes up over the school so that they can do the roof work. There are portables on site so that we have swing space so that the students are moved from those areas when construction is being done in those places. Vanguard is a new project that was just approved late last school year. It's another seismic project. You can see in the diagram the main body of the building in blocks 1 and 2. Block 3, which is the heritage building at the front of the property that faces Fraser Highway there, is the one that is not seismic. The plan is for that to be removed and for an addition to be added onto the existing building to the side, which you can see in the little picture there to the top left of that picture. So we will be adding 250 square meters, which is 2 classrooms and a weight room that will be added onto the existing building. That project is on schedule and we are planning to put the tender out for that in February. And with that, I will hand it back to Chair Ross and answer any questions if there are.
And thank you, Secretary Treasurer. I would like to know if there's any questions that trustees have on this. You mentioned the project manager. Is that our staff or is that an external source? Is that how can you just explain that just for my own interest, if you don't mind?
Yep, so we have a internal staff member that manages our capital projects, and she's also responsible for our energy programs.
Right. Okay, very good, thank you. Anyway, so I don't see any other questions or comments at this time, so if I could just get a mover and a seconder, the Board of Education approves the amended receives the report on the capital projects 2021/2022 for information as presented. Suzanne Pro, thank you, and seconded by David Todd. Okay, thank you. No other questions, and so all those in favor? And it's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, over to 7.2, the annual review of trustee remuneration. The Board of Education approves the increase of 4.8% effective January 1st, 2022, based on the 12-month change in Canada Consumer Price Index, the CPI, in accordance with policy number 7, section 11, and to update the salaries in policy number 7, section 11.1 with the new salaries. Okay, is there a presentation you have on this, Secretary Treasurer?
No presentation, but just maybe a little background for the public. The policy was updated 2 years ago to have an annual salary increase be brought to the board for effective January 1st of that year. And that raise would be based on the CPI for the previous 12 months, which in this case is 4.8% as of December. And so basically there's a motion in your package if trustees wish to go that and have that discussion, and also in your package is the proposed new salaries that would be effective January 1st, based on that 4.8% raise, if that is the will of the board.
And thank you very much. Okay, so I need a mover and a seconder for this first of all, and then we'll talk about it. So can I have a mover, please? Trustee Shelley Coburn, mover, and seconder by Tony Ward. Thank you very much. Okay, questions for staff or for conversation? Maybe I could just clarify, when was the last raise the board received?
The board received a raise last January.
So last January in 1 year? Oh, so is this an annual thing, isn't it?
Annual process, yes.
It's an annual thing, okay. So it's not just every 4 years, new election coming up or something like that. So remember every 4, okay, good. That clarifies that for me, good. Okay, and 4% seems quite generous. I appreciate that, but it's tied to the CPI, so that's pretty clear. I see David Todd, you have your question, you have your hand up. Would you like to ask a question, sir?
Yeah, so thank you, Secretary Treasurer. So yeah, we, in an effort to kind of do away with the 4-year kind of big bump that raises eyebrows and everything to tie it to the cost of inflation, I believe in the best efforts of this board did not imagine like a 4.8% increase. And believe it or not, I am a member of several pensions. So my experience with other pensions is like one was 2.8 and one was 4.4, an increase right now. So, I guess, I'm not sure the teacher's pension, if they're using a different number or whatever, I just, we tied it exactly to the CPI in the last month of the year. Is that correct, Secretary Treasurer?
It's the rolling 12-month CPI based on the Canadian government website. The link is in your package. It actually shows going back in numerous years, actually. And that was what the rate was with the update that they did in December, which they only do late every month. So there isn't any newer information.
Okay, thank you. No further questions then. Thanks.
Thank you, Trustee Todd. Any other questions from trustees at this point? Okay, I will call the question then. All those in favor of the annual review of trustee remuneration increase at 4.8% effective January 1, 2022, based on the 12-month change in Canada price index, the CPI, in accordance with policy number 7, section 11, and to update the salaries in policy number 7, section 11.1 with the new salaries. All those in favor? Okay, I see Trustee Fox, Trustee Ross, Trustee Todd, Trustee Ward. Those opposed? Okay, so it's I don't. Okay, Marnie Wilson, I see you as you're opposed. Okay, thank you. Trustee Coburn, are you opposed? You are, and also Suzanne Perot. Okay, the motion is passed. All right. Thank you very much. Okay, on to the 7.3, the financial update, please. Go ahead, Secretary Treasurer.
Thank you, Chair Ross. As trustees will recall, last week, Assistant Secretary Treasurer Shin Chan went through the results up to December 31st with the board, but wanted to share publicly where we're at as of the end of December, but won't go into as much detail, obviously, as we did at the Finance Facilities meeting, but we'll be also open to questions at the end. For the public, just want to remind people that these results are compared to the preliminary budget. So those were the budgets that were done in May and June of last school year. The amended budget, which is a better reflection of the reality of where the district will be coming to the board at the February public board meeting. Also wanted to point out that comparisons are really difficult due to the substantial growth that the district has undertaken this year, plus the weird abnormalities of COVID startup last year, where we were definitely not normal, and you'll definitely see that in the supply budgets, but I'll address that when we get there. public may remember that due to the growth, we project another $7.8 million in funding. That hasn't started flowing to the district yet. The ministry does a recalc in December, and then the funds start flowing in January through June. We are currently in a deficit of 7.4 million, and you compare that to 2.3 last year. It looks like a very large difference. Part of that is the funding timing of some of the funds that I just mentioned, but also the fact that last year was definitely not a normal startup, and the costs were not spent. If you go back to the previous year of 2009, at December, the deficit was $6.4 million, which was the last non-COVID year before this happened, just to give public a better understanding of where we're at with that. On the revenue side, we're 41.2% of our budget compared to 41.8, so fairly close to last year. We are up $2 million and $2.1 million in funding from last year at this point in time. The majority of that is our ISP program at $1.5 million, which has rebounded fairly nicely this year. Plus, there was also an increase in the tuition amounts that were paid by students. And the other is that we did have an increase in our operating grant budgeted, but we also have exceeded that with what I had mentioned previously. On the staffing categories, need to point out that for 10-month employees, we should be at about 40% of the budget, and for 12-month employees, 50% when you're looking at these things. On the benefit side, fairly close to last year at 40.2% versus 39.5%. When you go and actually look at the percentage of benefits as a percentage of the salaries, it's 22.8% this year versus 22.9%, so very much in line with what we've seen in the past. On the SEA, special education assistance side, 38.6 versus 39.1. A little lower. Part of that is because we did add SEAs from October right up into December. The last ones were being added, and a lot of those were done on as casuals or short-term agreements until we found permanent positions, and it's part of the reason that our substitute line is a little bit higher as well. Principals and VPs should be roughly 50%. It's a little higher. That's due to the fact that we added two vice principals due to the enrollment being a lot higher than we anticipated. One at Donna Gabriel Robbins Elementary and the other at Willoughby Elementary, and those were both there for September. The substitute line, as mentioned, is you look at the percentage, 61.9% of the budget. It's always higher as a preliminary because we don't have all the vacancies in there. That'll be a different budget number, obviously, when we do the amended budget. But we also had higher SEA replacement costs, which was mentioned before, but also higher costs under the custodial line for custodial replacement as well. The support staff is a mixture of 10 and 12 months, so it should be in between the 40 and 50%, which we're at 45% compared to the 45.9, so it's kind of right where we expected it to be. Teachers, 40.3 versus 40.9, a little lower, a little bit above budget, but as mentioned, it's not reflective of what the actual number of teachers are in there. We also have a fair number of teachers, especially at secondary, that'll be starting in semester 2. The growth, not all of that was put into the first semester because the timetable is already set, but there are definitely more courses and more teachers in secondary for the second semester. The supplies, definitely up from where we were last year at this point in time. Last year was an extremely low level of supplies. We are at 55.4 versus 47.2. If you look at the 2019 year before COVID, it was at 53.1, which shows that this year is a little more reflective of that. There are some things that we had ordered last year that are arriving. We are also having issues with lead time, as is everyone else in the world, and uncertainty as to when things arrive. We are up 1.7 million from last year. $1 million of that is in supplies because we are actually ordering like we normally do at schools and at the central office. And ISP commissions, due to the fact that our ISP program has increased, has also gone up a substantial amount as well. On the capital side, you can see we've spent 1.6 million on a preliminary budget of 1.2, and a lot more than the 591,000 that was last year. Those are the items that the board restricted. It's items that were ordered before June but didn't arrive. A lot of those were the work on the portables and the work that is being done at Aldergrove and Betty Gilbert, and as well as other things that were ordered that didn't get here in time for June. To give a better perspective, when you're looking at a deficit this time of year, you can see here we have the green trend line is the current school year, and then you have the 4 previous school years. You can see every year has started in a deficit and has slowly improved month over month. It's not unusual for us to be in a deficit. We get very little funding over the summer months, and most of our funding does come in the back half of the school year. So I think this graph helps people understand when they see such a big deficit number to not panic too much, as that deficit does get reduced as we go throughout the school year. And with that, I will hand it back to Chair Ross, and if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
And thank you. And I'm getting a number of trustees interested in asking questions. So go ahead, David Todd. We'll let you go first. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Treasurer. So 2 concerns, I guess. Yes, if I remember my math on rise over run and the slope of your deficit projections, it does look similar to the slope of previous years. My only concern is it's starting a little deeper in the hole, and of course that means you need to get a little further out. I'm not going to use what keeps you up at night, but it's related to my second question, because sick time is an entitlement. I will not dispute that ever, but we are in a pandemic, and I would think if last year we seemed to get a fair amount of funding based on pandemic and planning and that, this year when people are actually getting sick and they're experiencing 3 days and that kind of stuff, they are entitled to it without a doubt, but our costs are going to be a lot higher, and that's not necessarily something that we've budgeted, that this year we'd get way more 3 to 5 to 6, 7 days away, and that is kind of putting a hole in our budgetary projections. So I'm concerned about that. Has there been talk around the province about, kind of, because this year people are going to be using it. It's almost like an unplanned expenditure due to the ravages of this pandemic. Has there been any request at the provincial level or anything just to acknowledge that and say for 1 year, maybe you can keep other stuff or there's some kind of stipend for it? And then going back to, are there any clouds on the horizon that you're concerned about that would not get us within the realm of what our plans were around the deficit this year?
So for your first question on the steepness of the starting point, the district did plan to have a $3.3 million deficit when we did our preliminary budget, which is one of the larger starting deficits that we've had as a district when we've done a preliminary budget. So I would expect to have a deeper starting point than what we have historically, because we've planned to have a bigger deficit than we have historically. And we had the accumulated surplus funds to cover that, and we've talked with trustees of how we want to get to a point where our preliminary budget is a balanced budget and doesn't require surplus dollars to do so. So yeah, we'll work through that, and we are on a course to do that. And we with our large enrollment growth, that'll help us, and we'll talk more about that publicly when we go through the amended budget. And the deficit will be a bigger budgeted deficit, but a lot of it is one-time items and money that was already appropriated. The concern I have is how much of it's actually going to get here. The buses, the electric buses that we ordered last year, were supposed to be here in October, then they were supposed to be here in November, and they were supposed to be here in December, and then February, they skipped January, and today we were just informed they're hoping March. Trying to plan on when some of these large ticket items arrive is almost impossible because the timelines change every other week on these. And so that's one of the things that I am worried about is that I think we'll do better than budget, but how much of that is because we couldn't actually get what we ordered, and it just may look better than it really is. And I think that's going to be a problem ongoing. It's going to take a while for the supply chains around the world to sort themselves out. So that is a concern. It makes it hard to do budgets and to do planning when you can't count on when you're going to get things. And it also makes it hard to do just the way we do our budgets, because the time that we get confirmed funding and the planning cycles have always been difficult. And now to add lead times in there, it's a real problem.
Mm-hmm.
And did I miss one of your questions in there, Trustee Todd?
Yes. Yes, you did. The second part around, expenditures on substitute sick time and your concerns this year in, a second pandemic year.
Yeah, so as we mentioned at the finance facilities and mentioning it here again, that's one of the items that are outstanding for staff to figure out for the amended budget. January really is the first time it's really hit us really hard. So we really want to see what that looks like financially with all the subs that need to be done this month because of COVID. We're hoping that it doesn't last super long, the numbers that we're seeing with COVID. So we'll bring more information on that to the public meeting and to the finance and facilities meeting in February. As to conversations about is there any funding coming, it's been asked. There hasn't been any indication so far that there's any further funding for anything like that is on the horizon. But the reality is I think districts are really only hitting January and they really don't know what that impact is yet and what the long-term impact is. And so I'm sure there'll be more conversations about that. Whether there will be any more funding or not, I can't comment.
Thank you, Trustee Todd. Excuse me. I'm on to Trustee Charlie Fox. Would you like to speak at this time?
Well, thank you very much, Chair. Through you, if I could, to Mr. Zelli. Firstly, I'd like to say thank you for your work you and your staff do. I mean, it's a tremendously challenging time with COVID and on all the expenses and issues associated with that, and a limited budget. And transitioning from the municipal context to this, I find it very challenging to understand how the ministry and the Treasury Board see budgeting in the context of, oh, you're doing an amended budget for this year in January and February. The year is 50% plus over. It just doesn't, in terms of rational sense, it doesn't make any sense. But more to the point, you've answered a couple of questions. I was going to ask about the supply chain. Is the supply chain issues affecting our budget and our ability to provide programs for kids?
It's definitely impacting our budget, whether it's impacting our ability to supply education for kids. At this point, I don't believe so. The one that I do worry about is portables. We mentioned to you guys that there'll be portables in our amended budget being ordered now so that we can hopefully get them installed for September. That would, if those don't arrive, that will definitely impact education for students. That's one that's definitely got me worried. Portables used to be fairly easy to get in this province. It's been getting harder and harder, and now with supply chain issues, who knows? So that one is one that we are keeping an eye on. Technology, there is some stuff that we need to order, but it's more some replacement equipment, like for the wave, replacement of waves of technology that we've done for students. And then also the infrastructure that we want to do at elementary school. There is infrastructure, we want to upgrade it and improve it. So a lot of the things that we're doing, we're trying to get ahead of things, so they're not necessarily negatively impacting. It just delays what we're hoping to implement.
Good. And the other thing was in terms of COVID supplements. Past year we had COVID supplements from the ministry to the districts to help with a number of different things, including sanitary, upping our maintenance staff, our custodial staff, and so on, plus obviously things to do with air movement in classrooms and so on. And I'm pleased to hear that you're hopefully sending the message to the province, to the ministry, that we need to have supplementary money, because again, this is going to cost dearly in what we can deliver to kids on a day-to-day basis in our schools. Because if we have to take money out for those kinds of issues, it takes away from programming and instructional. And so we need to make sure that they get that message and they understand that message. So continue to do that. And if it continues to be the way we are, maybe we need to send a message from our school trustees to the province along that line. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Fox. I don't see any other comments. My only comment that I'd like to make at this time is that revenue solves all your problems. And the good news this year is that we had, I think, 900 more students. The good news is our international students rebounded and is very strong. Those are two really strong things. Now, do you see us going forward? Do you think that both of those will remain strong? Or do you think we're going to have more students again in the future? What's the trajectory on new students coming to us, and also about the internationals? What's your thoughts on that, if you could comment?
Yeah, students continue to move into Langley. They have over the last many years here. I think we only, even last year, the district grew in enrollment, nowhere near what we thought it would be. So definitely anticipate it to grow. I hope it doesn't grow at 900 plus kids a year, because that would create substantial space issues. That's 2 elementary schools that we grew in 1 year, and we didn't add to 2 elementaries, we added 1. So we will definitely grow, but hopefully not at that pace. The international student program, you know, that one's always got the caveat to it, right? Right now, with what we know and how COVID has impacted us, we've rebounded very strongly, stronger than other districts. We've benefited from that. There's countries that have closed their international programs that, you know, international students have looked for other homes, and we've benefited obviously from that. Even within BC, there are some programs that have capped their enrollment due to homestay concerns. So, you know, and, you know, that started to get a bit of a challenge in this district as well, but we didn't cap, and so we were able to recoup, you know. So what happens next year, we're still having conversations with, you know, I don't see a drastic drop off unless there's something drastic that happens with COVID. But, you know, it may plateau as we continue to right size, because we did gain a lot of students that wouldn't typically have come to Langley. They would have typically gone other places. So we'll have to see how that plays out. I don't foresee, unless COVID goes crazy again and there's weird restrictions that we can't bring students over, which there aren't currently, the drop that we saw last year. But it's probably, you know, to think that it's going to rebound completely up to near the 1,000 mark that we had prior to COVID next year, I'd be cautious on saying that.
Yeah. All right, and thank you very much. Any other comments from trustees? Seeing none. Okay, I need a mover and a seconder, please. The Board of Education receives a report on the financial update for information as presented. Can I have a mover, please? Suzanne Perot and Shelley Coburn. Thank you. And all those in favor of the motion. And it passes unanimously. Thank you very much. On to the Policy Committee. Notice of motion, policy number 17, accumulated operating surplus. Is the policy chair going to move this? Or would you like me to move it? Doesn't matter.
If you would like me to, I can, or you can. The only thing that I would ask is I would just be wondering if there was any feedback when it went out for feedback. But other than that, you can go ahead and move it.
Okay, I'll go ahead and move it then. All right, so I need a mover and a seconder. The Board of Education approves policy number 17, accumulated operating surplus as presented. Moved by Shelley Coburn, the chair, and David Todd. Okay. Any questions on this? Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm just wondering to the Secretary Treasurer, Mr. Isley. I'm just wondering if when it did go out, if any feedback did come in, or is it only riveting to us?
There was no feedback received.
No surprise. Thank you very much.
All right. Hearing that, we have a mover and a seconder, and now just all those in favor, please. And it is also unanimously carried. Thank you very much. I'm on to new business number 9, and this is for Trustee Shelley Coburn. You wanted to bring up a provincial exams. Would you like to move that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Ross. And I think the question will be through the chair to the superintendent or whoever may be able to do this. So a couple days ago, the province canceled grade 10 and 12 provincial exams, and they're stating workforce capacity. And what this means is that there's those provincials will be written in, I believe, April or June, it says. Except for students who are graduating early, they're exempt from writing these exams. And the ministry says that they are committed to ensuring a continuity of learning for all students. So I'm just wondering, in this announcement, was there a plan for the continuity of retaining knowledge for the grade 10s and the grade 12s who aren't graduating early, who then have to turn around after not having a course for months? And this is something we talk about. It's the justification for summer session. We talk about lost learning and how this happens over the summer and how much work is done. And now we're going to, as a province, make these kids, these young people, write exams in April or June that they haven't had a class for in January. So I'm just wondering, through the chair to the superintendent, what has the province put in place for us to ensure that there's a continuity of learning for all our students? Thanks.
Yeah, Trustee Coburn, thanks for the question. The first thing is that the numeracy and the literacy exams aren't necessarily attached to a course. They're more about skill-based exams. And so, but having said that, there is some prep work certainly that's done in schools around the skill development for kids who are taking those exams. And teachers and support staff do help our students work through that. So that does pose a bit of a problem for sure. I think the other piece is that we've gotten some information from the ministry and some direction certainly, but not all of it yet. We're waiting till February the 15th. I believe there's more information that's coming regarding, first of all, even the release of the exam results from the November and further to that, for those students who are potentially writing in April or June, we're going to run into a bit of an issue around the window of opportunity for students actually to be able to write those exams. So are they extending that window as well? And the other piece really is, and it's an unanswered question at this time, and I don't think anybody can answer, is what's the full effect of COVID on, because that was the reason apparently from the ministry that exams were canceled for the January sitting. What makes us believe that April and June could be any different? So those are all unanswered questions at this point. I know that the ministry has put out a Q&A for us that we're going to share with our schools, and that should help our counselors and our administrators answer some of those questions. In addition to that, I don't believe at this point that there's any impact on grade 12 students who are potentially going to post-secondary. You indicated that as well, and I believe the ministry said that they would step forward and support those students should that be a barrier in any way. So those are that's the information we have at this point, hoping to have more by February the 15th for some of those additional questions that you ask. And when I get those answers, I'll be sure to share those with trustees as well.
Great. And sorry, can I have just a follow-up with this? Sure. Okay, so you're talking about numeracy and literacy. What I'm taught, and maybe I didn't articulate. So when I went to school many years ago, when I was in grade 12, all my academic courses I wrote provincials for. So history, Western civilization, biology, all that good stuff. I was in a semester system, so I wrote my finals in January, and then I got new courses, and you know how this works. What I'm asking is those kids, those grade 12 students who aren't going to graduate early, because those are the ones that the ministry said, don't worry about post-secondary. They haven't said anything about those who are finishing on time in April or May, whenever. Those grade 12s specifically that say had French or biology in their first semester have a whole semester off, and now the government is expecting them to write that provincial, because the only ones exempt are the ones who are graduating early, as far as they've said. So they've stopped their classes in January, and then they're going to write a provincial in April. So that's what I'm looking at, is if that's their plan, what is their continuity to make sure that in those months that learning remains, so that those graduates aren't penalized. I think that's more what I'm asking.
And Trustee Coburn, things have changed a little bit around the exam processes. The provincial exams that you're talking about no longer are in place for students.
So
that's good news for those students. So the assessments are all done within the classroom by the classroom teacher. So the other exams that we were talking about around the literacy and the numeracy exams are more not attached to classes specifically, more global assessments around skill level.
All right, perfect.
Okay.
Yep.
Great. Okay, thank you. And so moving on, trustee comments. So I thought what I'd do is I'd start with our youngest trustee first.
Do you have a question?
Oh, do you have a question?
No. Trustee Perotas.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that, Trustee Perot. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. This is actually for Superintendent Mel Gill.
Okay.
I'll let him race to the podium.
Get my steps in.
It's good for you. Thank you. Sorry about that, Mel. Just in line with Trustee Colburn's questioning, I think you already know where I'm going to go. What are we going to do with respect to ensuring there's some scaffolding and front loading for our learners with disabilities and needs of extra supports? Because that becomes a gap. And when we're dealing with anything around that executive functioning experience or delayed executive functioning, we know we're going to start losing information fairly quickly, and anxieties go up and all those wonderful, great things that come with it. And so I don't know, you may not have had an opportunity even processing that, but, as I'm listening to Trustee Colburn's question, I'm thinking about those kiddos who really struggle, and what are we going to try to do to front load that experience for them?
Again, appreciate the question. I think one of the things I do appreciate is the professionalism of our staffs and our resource teachers and our support staff. Again, I just want to reiterate that it's a skill-based exam that's not connected to any course. And so the opportunity to have more time between now and when the exam takes place for those students can only be beneficial for them, especially if they're looking at preparing themselves around the skill development. I'll certainly give you the fact that the time between now, if you were sitting and getting yourself prepared to writing an exam in January and suddenly that's been taken away, it's going to be difficult for some students, especially when it comes to the anxiety around, okay, so I thought I was ready, I wanted to take the exam or the assessment, and now I can't. The other piece that's going to be a huge anxiety for students is, what does this mean now around post-secondary? Regardless about what other people are saying, there's always going to be that uncertainty until we get some clarity from the ministry around that piece. I think that that'll be a bit of a cloud that hangs over this decision.
Okay. Excuse me, I got a bit of a cough tonight. I understand that Shelley Coburn, you have a follow-up, and then we should move on. Thank you. Go ahead. You're muted. Thank you.
So thank you through the chair to the superintendent. So I guess too, and then just one more point of clarification. So with the French immersion or the French studies, French cohorts, don't they have like a literacy, an oral and written component? Isn't it different for them than it is for those in the regular stream? So I thought they had like a literacy exam.
Yes, similar to the English literacy, there's a French component as well. At the same expectations around the April and the June rate. If students have done part of the component, which some have, and they haven't done the second half, I believe at this point they're going to hold on to the results of the first, but they haven't released any of that information. I think so. Yeah, it'll be the same for the French and the English as well.
Great, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving on to trustee comments if I could. So go ahead, Charlie Fox, you are our youngest, so we'll start with you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for that honor. I noticed some of my colleagues are quite enjoying that. I have to start off by saying a special thank you to our on our presentation today. Start off with welcoming our new superintendent, Mel Gill, and just saying thank you to the Maggie Gabriel, Mike Pugh, his team, the team from LSS for the outstanding job they did with their presentation today. You really captured the words, you captured the feelings, you captured the meaning of the whole context of our truth and reconciliation journey and our anti-racism emphasis, all captured truly within our bigger picture plan for the district. And so I think it's really critically important, and we understand how it dovetails into the learning goals and outcomes that we've got. And I think that it's fair to say that I'm constantly proud of the work our district staff do. Mr. Isley with his work and his team's work in the area of the budget. Thank you, Trustee Coburn, for acknowledging that. And the work they do with the budget, it's a very complex and it's so convoluted. And the work he does with our trustee board, just in managing it and helping us to understand it is really appreciated. And I think the last thing, we had an update on the COVID situation. I want to thank our district leadership team for the leadership they are providing in there, that area. This is extremely challenging times. I can't believe how many times the rules of the road change, how many times things just, they're there one day, they're gone the next, they're changed the next. It's very complex, and there seems to be a multitude of masters in this whole conversation. And thank you to our leadership team for the work they do and the leadership they provide, and my colleagues on as trustees as well, because we try to work through this and we've got good leadership to help us. So thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate that, Charlie. And could I have Marty Wilson, please? Go ahead, Trustee Wilson.
You must be the second youngest.
Great, I'm the second youngest. I had no idea. Wow. Okay, I want to start with saying that I was fortunate enough to participate in the LSS capstone presentations recently, and although it was virtual and not nearly as good as it is when we go in person, I understand that with COVID, it's where we're at. I am always so impressed with the young leaders we are fostering in this district, and this time was more exceptional than ever. That just gets better and better. So I'm so glad we have capstone. And I know that a lot of people put work into that. Don Tomlinson comes to mind. So it's just an amazing program. I'm glad we have it. So thank you to everybody that helps with that. I also want to thank staff. When I say staff, I mean the leadership team. I mean everybody who presented, and right down to every teacher and support staff and everybody. I don't want to start listing because I'll forget somebody, but I want to thank staff, students, and parents for continuing to help move us through the pandemic. And I know it starts to sound empty because we say it over and over, but we truly appreciate everything you're doing every day. I know it seems never ending, but we are going to get through this one day, and it's because of you that we will. So thank you for all your hard work. Lastly, and with a heavy heart, I must acknowledge the announcement today from Williams Lake First Nations regarding the former St. Joseph's Mission Residential School. I recommend that everyone listen to the full announcement that Chief Sellers made today. It is hard to listen to. The atrocities that the investigation has uncovered, The systematic torture, rape, and starvation that the children faced is unimaginable for most of us, but it is something that the survivors and their families deal with every day. As Chief Sellers said, we must hear these truths no matter how painful. And there can be no reconciliation before there is truth. I was also very aware of the fact that Chief Sellers kept emphasizing that these were preliminary findings, which tells me that there is probably many more discoveries to come. So I want to express my deepest condolences to all of the families whose children never came home, and please remind people to reach out for help if needed. Thank you for your time. Good night.
Thank you, Trustee Wilson. Trustee Tony Ward, please. Go ahead, Mr. Ward.
Thank you very much. I'm not going to say much because what's already been said by Trustee Fox and Trustee Wilson is very good. So I just want to thank the thousands of people who are watching tonight and tuning in, and but no, some good discussion and some serious topics. And I just want to echo at least what Trustee Wilson just kind of finished with there. So just pause and reflection at this moment, but I won't say any more than that. So thank you.
And thank you very much. Go ahead, Suzanne Perot. Trustee Perot, would you like to speak now?
Thank you, Chair. My heart's beating. Well, I'll start off easy. I want to just really give a warm welcome to our new leadership staff. We're very thankful for you and the heavy lifting you have been doing during this time, constant heavy lifting in this time of pivoting. And thank our staff for this very important and meaningful report you offered our district and our families in the community so that they can see what's going on in our schools. It's super important work, and I thank you for that. And I thank our partner groups for your ongoing support to the staff within the schools and the families. And I thank our families for your patience and support as well as we continue to pivot with all the instructions that come and go and come again and go. And moving forward into today's most important conversation, almost all of our vulnerability within our Indigenous families today can be directly assigned to the past practices of separating children from families. That separation control seeped into many of our other vulnerable communities, straining and breaking the sense of self, ability to lead, and ability to trust. As we continue to journey towards truth and reconciliation, we need to keep our eye on the heart of the conversation as it shows up in all its subtlest forms, like showing up in our schools, where they get to be graced with the gifts of our artists creating murals, sharing stories and history and their gifts and abilities that reflect our children and staff entering. Every child matters. They truly matter in the big and little steps. And we need to keep listening, holding space, maintaining our path towards a collaborative journey in truth and reconciliation within the territories we reside, work, and play to make our communities more safe and exclusive, successfully graduating our students. So important that we're doing that. I love what Kevin Lamarre said. How amazing is it if our kids can walk into our buildings and breathe. That was so symbolic of moving away from fight, flight, freeze into rest and relaxation when we can just breathe. And so to all our students and our staff, you belong here. And we heard it multiple times tonight. There is no reconciliation without truth. And so we hold each other dear in these times. And for our families who are impacted, our staff, my deepest condolences to you today.
Thank you, Suzanne Perot. On to Trustee Coburn. Go ahead, Trustee Coburn.
Thank you. So I was going to use my trustee comments to first welcome the new district leadership team and to also point out how incredible and wonderful this school district is and everybody in it, and how we've had all our sites open. And even on Boxing Day, Gordana was at Douglas Park opening it up. I've never seen somebody so happy to be at work on a holiday. Oh, so I don't want to not extend my appreciation and recognition. Like Trustee Wilson said, we do say it, but often, but it's because it's so true and it matters to hear that you're appreciated. So thank you. And I had something much nicer and more eloquent, but things changed. So tonight I'm going to take my trustee comments and I'm going to read a little something. And I'm not reading it full. I'm picking the pieces that are relevant. And so I'm going to read a little of the Indian Act because it's still in effect. So for many Canadians, they don't believe that we have racism written into our laws, but we do. So the Indian Act created residential schools 1886 to 1996. It's first discussed in the 1940s. So please be patient and listen. And again, you know, this could be very triggering. And I'll end with what I read, but I would also like to say to all of us who have friends who also happen to be Indigenous or Aboriginal or Métis or Inuit or however they choose to identify, every single friend you have has been impacted by residential schools. Every single friend, person you know, has been impacted by this. So when we talk about these things, we're talking about our friends. So I would like to share with you a little bit about the Indian Act tonight. The Governor and Council may make regulations which shall have the force of law for the committal by justice of Indian agents of children of Indian blood under the age of 16 years old to such industrial schools or boarding school, there to be kept, cared for, and educated for a period not extending beyond the time at which such children shall reach the age of 18 years. Indian Act 1884. And so it began, the most aggressive and destructive of all Indian Act policies. When the federal government signed the 11 numbered treaties starting in 1871, it assumed responsibility for the education of the Indians of Manitoba, Saskatchewan, and Alberta, as well as portions of Ontario, British Columbia, and in the Northwest Territories. Residential schools brought immeasurable human suffering to the First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people, the effects of which continue to reverberate through generations of families and many communities. Other policies were harsh but could be worked around. But when the government took the children from the families, it was unbearable. The goal of the school was to kill the Indian in the child, but tragically, it was the children themselves who died in overwhelming numbers at these schools. It is estimated that 6,000 of the 150,000 children who attended the schools between 1870 and 1996 either died or disappeared. The numbers are not precise because no one kept accurate records, not the schools, the churches that managed the schools, or the Indian agents. Children died at the schools from disease, malnourishment, broken hearts. Many children who escaped from their residential school died on the journey back to their home community. I'm almost done. Prior to the 1876 Indian Act, education was provided at day schools, built on reserves for the children to attend and begin their assimilation into settler societies. But low attendance impeded this plan, so they sent a gentleman by the name of Davin to do a report, and in the end, it became known as the Davin Report. And this is what it says. The report asserted that if assimilation was to be successful, schools should be far removed from the home community in order to nullify the influence of the parents, and their mythology should be replaced with Christianity. The government revised its policy based on the Davin Report and abandoned on-reserve schools in favor of off-reserve, dormitory-style industrial schools. The government preferred this new system because it separated the children from their parents, thereby allowing for a full indoctrination of the children into Christian beliefs and customs, to kill the Indian in the child. And lastly, I'm going to end with a statement from Prime Minister John A. Macdonald in the House of Commons. When the school is on the reserve, the children lives with its parents, who are savages. He is surrounded by savages, and though he may learn to read and write, his habits and training and mode of thought are Indian. He is simply a savage who can read and write. It has been strongly pressed on myself as the head of the department that Indian children should be withdrawn as much as possible from the parental influence, and the only way to do that would be to put them in central training industrial schools where they will acquire the habits and modes of thought of white men. My deepest condolences to all who were affected by today's announcement.
And thank you, Trustee Coburn. David Todd, sorry, but you're next.
I can't say anything more about how wrong we set up an industrial solution to a problem that was our own making, and terrible injustice to all of our First Nations. I can't say anything more. It's been said. My hearts are with the families who are hurting. And as I've said before, no parent ever sends a child to school and not expecting them to return. It's not done. Sorry, there's background noise. I did want to welcome our new leadership team. It's been mentioned before. They have done a wonderful launch, and again, our district is tackling the hard problems and the difficult conversations. I want to acknowledge too that there's a tremendous amount of frustration and anxiety out there amongst us. People are second guessing much of life. What was foundational before, people are questioning. And I want to thank parents, children, the public who continue to trust the Langley School District and send their kids to school every day in our district. As mentioned before, it's open, and we are doing our very best to maintain a sense of normalcy. Just a second. Excuse me. Yeah, a sense of normalcy in every child's life. Schools can give grace and can give hope, and that message cannot be parlayed enough. Education is our way out of our problems, and the fact that parents trust us for those 5.5 hours or 6 hours every day to do our best with the students is just tremendous. I did want to comment, February coming up is Black History Month, and it was mentioned above, and one of my heroes actually a while ago when I was going through university was somebody called Lincoln Alexander. And as a law student in 1953, he actually had the dean lecturing him in the lecture hall at Osgoode Hall, the University of Toronto's law granting organization. And he stood up and he challenged the dean for using inappropriate language during a lecture. And it actually divided the class of 200 students along almost impartial lines. And at that point, he knew that he could make a difference. He went on to become one of the first Black MPs represented us in the House of Commons, and was later appointed Lieutenant Governor of Ontario. We can learn so much if we turn over the rocks, if we look in those places and shine a light. Unfortunately, the light today that was shone is very difficult, very heavy. I appreciate this board. I appreciate our district. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Todd. And my comments, I just want to say how, we may not be the biggest district, but I think we're the best district. I think we're the most hopeful district. And can you imagine where we'll be a year from now, 5 years from now, from 10 years from now, because of the foundation that we heard about today that's being laid? This is a good news story. So thank you very much, everyone, for your comments tonight. I'd like to move on to to question period, that is. Due to the fact that the public will be using an online platform for this regular meeting, the process for question period is as follows. The board will not be taking questions from members of the public in real time. We encourage members of the public to please submit their questions by emailing feedback@sd35.bc.ca. Questions will be accepted up to 1 hour after the adjournment of the meeting. Board members or the appropriate staff will respond to the individual directly to acknowledge they've received the email within 24 hours. Thereafter, a response will be provided to the individual. The purpose is to ensure that those present in the audience have an opportunity to obtain clarification concerning business conducted during that meeting. Priority will be given to responding to one question per person before considering further questions from any individual. The follow will help the public develop questions for question period at a board meeting that is in keeping with the goal of a respectful and focused meeting. Questions. 1. Need to be directed to the chair and not to staff. Need to be related directly to the topic on the agenda. 3. Need to be succinct, focused, and not be a statement. 4. May not be asked that are related to personnel or directed at an individual trustee. 5. May not be asked that are related to contract negotiations. And lastly, number 6, the questioner shall provide their name so it can be reflected in the minutes. All of the above directions are provided for in policy number 7, board operations. The chair may answer, may defer to staff, or indicate a question may not be in keeping with the above guidelines. The board appreciates the public's interest and wants to ensure a professional meeting is conducted, with question period focusing on providing guests with the clarification they seek. Trustees also welcome questions from members of the public apart from question period, and their contact information is available on the school district website. The chair called for questions from the public. I would like to now call for adjournment. Can I have a mover for adjournment? Shelley Coburn and Tony Ward is seconder. The meeting was adjourned at 9:17 p.m. And all those in favor? Thank you very much. Great. It's carried unanimously. Without that, have an otherwise wonderful evening. Thank you for coming. Good night, everyone.
Good evening. Good night.
Good night, everyone.